Welcome to False Claims, Real Consequences.
Welcome back to False Claims, Real Consequences with employment attorney Stephen Teller, a trusted advocate who has spent more than 2 decades helping employees respond to retaliation, discrimination, and career-threatening legal traps. I'm John Clements. Today we're talking about something we've seen again and again, especially at Amazon, performance management programs like Focus and Pivot that claim to support improvement but are often used to quietly push workers out. This is on a pivot plan when Amazon's performance coaching is really a push out. So first of all, Stephen, thanks for joining us today. Happy to see you again.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's good to see you. Really appreciate your help.
Yeah, and we're both Seattle area residents, so we both know a ton of people who work for Amazon. So it's just kind of in the air out here. So I'm really excited to dig into this topic. And just help some people out, our own friends and potentially even family members who are working for the company. So I want to just kind of dig into this. First question, what's the key legal and practical difference between being laid off and being fired for performance?
So, a layoff is sort of neutral. They're saying we don't have the work for you to do. Being fired for performance is where, the employer is claiming, your work wasn't satisfactory and they needed to get rid of you to replace you.
And
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no good.
Oh, I was just going to say that, really the key practical difference for people is minimal. You're entitled to unemployment benefits in either situation, for example, under most circumstances. And it's really just about kind of how it feels. If they're claiming your poor performance versus they're saying, hey, we don't need your department anymore.
Yeah, actually, something you said there I want to key in on, because I guess I just assumed if you were fired for performance, fired for cause, something like that, you didn't get unemployment benefits, like that was no longer available to you. But I hear you saying maybe that's not quite right.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So you're entitled to unemployment benefits after you've been working long enough at a job in your state to get a kind of have an account at the Employment Security Department. This is Washington, but I think it's similar from state to state. And then when you stop working somewhere, then they analyze what's the reason for the separation. And if the employer initiates a termination because of misconduct, which is action taken in willful disregard of your employer's interest, that's when they'll deny unemployment benefits because of termination. You can also get unemployment benefits denied in many circumstances when you quit, unless you fall within a few limited exceptions. Things like, your military spouse moved, or your health or safety, or sometimes even your morals would be compromised by continuing the job. There's a limited list of good cause quit reasons. A layoff, You're always going to get benefits because, you didn't have misconduct.
Well, that makes a lot more sense. So then, if I'm hearing you correctly, there's potentially not a ton of difference between being laid off and being fired for performance, as we talked about. So then why would an employer like Amazon try to blur that line?
Do I find this a bit of a puzzle myself. It seems to me that Amazon is out there deciding they want to have a turnover policy. They're going to get rid of some percentage of people every year. And, that makes some sense, right? We got people who at some level stopped working hard or have been promoted past their level of performance quality. There's always the concept of sort of weeding out the dead wood, right? Or cutting out the dead wood. I get that. But then, they've forced that on the manager. And so now the manager at Amazon has an unregretted attrition metric. They literally have to pick somebody to get rid of. And that could mean, they have a team of, 8 great people and they don't want to get rid of anybody, but they have to pick someone. And here's where it really, I think, gets kind of dishonest is the process that they use for that is never, sorry, I got to fire someone and it's you. It's always, your performance isn't satisfactory. And that little piece right there is a big piece.
I kind of wondered if it was going to come down to that, what the scenario you described, of it just almost sounding like it's a way to help the managers or the company at least save face and not really admit to doing what it is they're actually doing. Is that kind of a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some level, I think they can turn up this, unregretted attrition metric to, 10% if they want to do sort of stealth layoffs and not tell the world about it. But even at 5%, what they're doing is creating a justification for every termination. And that way, if somebody feels like, well, maybe it's because I'm in a wheelchair that my manager didn't appreciate me, or maybe it's race or gender or some other illegal motivation, then they've already, through their process, created a lot of documentation about these alternative reasons, which are, everybody's got problems at work. So you can always find something to fire someone for. I mean, that's part of what our courts recognize that. And Amazon goes out and seeks that out, tries to find it, documents it, even before telling the person, and then uses that as the basis for termination.
Yeah, I used to work at a big corporation, and this makes a lot of sense to me, Stephen. I'm tracking with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too, like where we live, again, Washington State, it's an at-will state. So how does that impact anything, being an at-will state or not?
Yeah. So a lot, right? I mean, the heart of this policy of we just want to get rid of people who, for whatever reason, we don't like anymore. That's not illegal. And we just want to document on them and pretend it's their fault. It's not. There are some legal theories you could use, but they're a stretch and they're not common in employment law for a number of reasons. So, the short answer is no, that's not illegal. Employment in Washington is what's known as employment at will. And, I got 5 minutes. I could talk about that and the exceptions. It might get a little pedantic, but I'm happy to do it.
I think that probably just to know what you've already said is good enough for now, and maybe another episode as we can get into at will a little bit more. Because I actually wanted to focus a little bit more specifically on the Amazon piece of that pie.
Okay.
So again, we both know people who work at Amazon, and we talk to them, and you find out that some of these Amazon workers say, well, I wasn't laid off. I was placed into this coaching program that led to maybe my resignation or release in some other way. So I'm curious to know from just your own experience, what does being performance managed out usually look like at a company like Amazon?
Well, I know Amazon pretty well and how it works for them. And it's got some similarities in many companies, and especially, Amazon's turnover policy and their they push people out in a number of ways. Let me say, my point is, there are a lot of Amazon managers now at other companies, and I'm seeing a repetition of the same set of policies at Microsoft sometimes now, or at ByteDance. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess to dig further into it, let's say I'm in a position, I work at Amazon, and unbeknownst to me, I'm one of the people that's maybe looking to get phased out. And so I get put in this performance plan. And like, what does that look like? Is it a situation where no matter what I do, it's not good enough? Or are there unrealistic expectations put on me? Like, what does it actually look like to kind of put me in that position to maybe even resign of my own accord?
Yeah. Well, they have kind of a 3-stage process, right? The first phase is called focus. The second is called pivot. And then there's an appeal of the pivot. So while you're in focus, many people they're not even informed, right? So what they'll find is the manager says, here's a list of things I want you to get done in the next 30 days or 60 days. Sometimes they'll say, and here's the leveling guidelines. This is what we expect your level of person that you're paid at to accomplish. And during that time, you can't transfer. So often people find out because they're like, things aren't going so well with my manager. Let me try to transfer. They get a new job, and then they find out they're blocked from moving because they're in focus. So it's a bit of a double secret probation. At the end of the focus, some people have performed well enough in their manager's eyes, perhaps, or there's another good unregretted attrition target for the same manager, right? Or for some other reason, and they get let out of focus. But if they don't, they get put into pivot. And at the beginning of pivot, Amazon has an HR person come in with the manager, and they have a meeting, and they give you a document, and they offer you money to leave now, or you can stay and complete, usually about 4 very difficult, essentially nearly impossible tasks. Many people, of course, choose to depart at that time. They give you 5 days to decide. And then after that, if you're still employed and you haven't said, okay, I'll quit, then they evaluate you at the end of, usually 30 days on how you did on these 4 very difficult tasks. And frequently say, sorry, your performance is not good enough. And then if you want to promise not to sue them, you can take less money in return for your promise not to sue them. And if you want, you can continue and appeal it. If you say, no, I think I did a good job on these tasks, you can go to a panel or a single manager, and you can make your case about why you should be retained anyway. And if you are retained anyway, you get a chance to look for another job within Amazon. And if you're not, then they give you even less money to promise not to sue them at that stage.
I love that emphasis on promising not to be sued.
There's 2 things they want at that point. They want you to leave, and they want you not to sue them. And I think that's a big part of the whole purpose of this out management system is to obtain a release of claims so that they don't have to fight everybody in litigation. Because there's a lot of ways, to sue for wrongful termination. And I think they've done some like actuarial, financial analysis to say it's worth this much.
Yeah, I'm sure they have. So I'm curious to know, as you describe these programs, do you think this is what these programs were designed to do, or were they designed for some other purpose and they're kind of being misused, or is it maybe a combination of both? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think in good times, and I think this is 7 and 10 years ago now, Amazon is spending and still is spending an awful lot of energy to recruit new people. And so if there's a mismatch with the manager, then having an appeal process for the out management process makes sense. You can retain good people who just for whatever reason didn't hit it off with the manager. And that made a lot of sense to me quite a while ago, and I thought it was effective at reducing recruiting costs and being more fair. Now I think we're in a phase of more downsizing. The policy has become pretty what's the right word? Sort of calcified and stiff. And I think it's really being used to manage people out instead of retaining good workers.
Okay, so it's kind of shifted over time with maybe what it was intended to do originally, but now it's maybe in practice doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, the point I think now is to protect Amazon from lawsuits for wrongful termination. I mean, if you think about it, they're spending a couple of months documenting, alleged performance failures. So now they've got an automatic reason. If I say, well, I think it was, race discrimination, or I think it was because I took a medical leave that I'm being targeted, they can say, well, 2 months ago, we've been documenting all these other reasons. And so they at least have a justification instead of, as I said, it's not illegal for them to say, I don't like you anymore. But without a good reason, they're too open to the idea that someone could say, hey, this is, because of my gender or something like that.
I see. How about, let's say I'm working at Amazon again, I'm the example. I've always strived to do well. I always get good reviews or whatever the case might be. And I ask for a leave of absence, or maybe I file a complaint of some kind against the company. And then I find out I'm in the pivot program. Like after that happens, what kind of legal concerns does that raise?
Well, I think we're looking always for, what might be that illegal motive behind being forced out. And um, that motive comes from usually from managers, right? It comes from the decision making of the person who selects you to be fired. It could be race or gender or disability, some protected class. It could be protected activity, like taking a medical leave, requesting an accommodation for a disability, protesting discrimination of one kind or another, or other hey boss, we're not supposed to drive the hazardous materials truck through the national forest. That's a workplace safety issue. Those kinds of opposition to some illegal activity. And so if one of those illegal motives is implicated, that's where we need to look at, what's the right choice. I mean, should you potentially talk to Amazon about lawsuit, or just take their money and depart, or fight for your job? There's a lot of factors that go into it.
And then might that be a good time also to reach out to someone like you who's a lawyer who could be able to kind of walk through the scenarios and offer some advice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really hoping to educate people about it, through this series. Partly, to be honest, I don't have time for, all the people who want to talk about what should I do. I'm being fired illegally, in particular from Amazon, but other tech companies around here and across the nation. And I'd like to give people an opportunity to educate themselves, about it and see if they can make some choices, and then, be more helpful in the more marginal cases, the more difficult questions. I mean, and I'm happy to, I'd be happy to educate more lawyers about these systems as well, because, it's a really unmet need when people are being forced out of their jobs. And what do I do now to maximize the separation, or to try to keep the job?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit of a sad commentary to say, I don't have time because there's just so many of these out there and there's an unmet need. So again, I'm glad you're here, trying to get this information out to people because, at the end of the day, we're all people. We need to help each other out. So I think that's a great motivation.
Well, thanks. I mean, I've been trying to keep up, and it's, I just feel like there's so many people who are, so blindsided by, this lie that, oh, it's really you. It's not us. It's you. Your performance is not good enough. And these are high achievers, right? These are people who have done really well their whole lives. Just getting a job in, one of the biggest companies in the world where they're doing cutting edge, amazing stuff. That's a lot. And then to be told, well, it's you, not us. It hits people pretty hard. And so I think the explanation of why this is happening, that it is them, not you, makes a lot of difference. And then also the kind of the due diligence of, is there discrimination here? Is there something illegal here? What is legal and what's illegal? Those are just important things for people to know about, just as a basis to get started trying to decide, should I take this money? Should I take a medical leave? I mean, by the time people get to this stage, they're exhausted, and being forced out within a few days, with not quite enough to get by until the next job, maybe with a huge or even a medium-sized vesting of shares. I mean, a big part of the pay for Amazon and other companies like this is the stock plan. So next month, I'm supposed to get, $50,000 worth of shares, and they're firing me 3 days before that. What can I do?
Yeah, exactly.
So those are some big questions for people.
Yeah. Speaking of big questions, Stephen, I have a ton more to ask, but we're running out of time. Hey, why don't we come back and do a part 2 and finish up our conversation? How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, we'll come back to this in our next episode. But if you've been placed on a performance plan that feels more like a trap than support, especially after you stood up for your rights, you don't have to navigate it alone. There are programs that may violate your legal protections and timing matters, and you can visit stellarlaw.com to learn more, or listen to our next episode to keep on with this discussion, or contact Stephen Teller for confidential help. This is False Claims, Real Consequences. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.